Look at the window in your living room right now. The one the afternoon sun comes blasting through every July. The one that has been costing you $400 a month in cooling bills for the last 15 summers without you even knowing it. The Amish have been sealing that exact same window with a $5 piece of material since 1827, and it drops the room temperature 16 degrees on a 96-degree afternoon. No electricity. No compressor, no permission needed. It sits on the shelf at every hardware store in America. Costs less than $5 a square yard. Your HVAC technician walks past it every day and has never said a word. On a 94-degree afternoon in Holmes County, Ohio, I stood inside a kitchen that read 68 degrees on the thermometer. There was no air conditioner. There was just one thing different about that south-facing window. In the next 10 minutes, you will know 3 things your HVAC contractor will never tell you: the exact material to buy, the 78-cent sealant the Amish have used since 1847, and the limestone box on the windowsill that drops the air temperature 5 degrees by itself. This works whether your house was built last year or in 1952. You do not need new construction. You do not need a contractor. You do not need permission. And by the end of this video, you will know the exact technique I learned from a man named Eli Stoltzfus, whose family has been using it on the same farmhouse since before the Civil War. Let me take you back to a summer afternoon in July of 2009, during the worst heat wave Holmes County had seen in 12 years. I had been invited to share a meal with a family I had come to know through a mutual friend who supplied lumber to their community. It was the 3rd week of July. The corn outside was knee-high, and the air was the kind of thick that makes your shirt stick to your back before you even step out of the truck. I walked through their front door expecting to be hit with that wall of heat you get inside an old farmhouse with no central air. Instead, I felt cool air on my forearms. Not chilled, not refrigerated, but genuinely cool. The kind of cool you used to feel walking into a stone library as a kid. I asked the grandmother how they did it. She just smiled and pointed at the south-facing window above the kitchen sink. There was a thin sheet of something covering the inside of the glass. It looked almost like frosted plastic, but with a slight shimmer to it, like the inside of an oyster shell. She told me her husband had cut it from a roll he bought at the general store in Berlin for less than $5 a square yard. She told me her grandmother had used the same kind of sheet, only made of tightly woven linen soaked in a particular mineral wash. She told me the technique went back to the German-speaking settlers who came to Pennsylvania in the 1820s, fleeing the smoke and noise of European cities, looking for a way to keep their homes livable in the brutal American summer without burning fuel. What I was looking at was a low-emissivity radiant barrier. The Amish call it window skin. Something so small, so cheap, and so deliberately hidden that the old man had to point it out twice before I understood what I was looking at. The science behind it was formally measured for the first time in a 1978 study from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, but the principle had been understood by craftsmen in central Pennsylvania for over a century before that. When sunlight hits a normal pane of glass, more than 70% of the infrared heat passes straight through and lands on your floors, your furniture, and your skin. That heat then radiates back into the room and stays trapped, because glass is very good at letting heat in and very bad at letting it out. It is a one-way door that works against you every single afternoon from May through September. But when you cover the inside of that glass with a reflective low-E film, the infrared bounces back out before it can ever heat up your living room. The visible light still comes through, so your kitchen still feels bright, but the radiant heat, the kind you cannot see but can feel, gets sent right back where it came from. According to measurements published by the Florida Solar Energy Center in 1994, a properly applied window film can reduce solar heat gain through a single south-facing window by 68%. Multiply that across every sun-facing window in your home, and the cumulative effect on your cooling load is staggering. Eli Stoltzfus told me his family had measured the difference using a simple mercury thermometer hung 6 feet from the window. With the film, the room held steady at 72 degrees on a 96-degree afternoon. Without it, the same room climbed to 88 by 3 in the afternoon. That is a 16-degree swing from a piece of material that costs less than a gallon of milk. And it is the same trick his great-grandfather used, only the modern version is more durable and easier to apply. But here is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because if this works so well, and if it has been known and used in plain communities for nearly 200 years, then a very obvious question starts forming in the back of your mind. Why has no one in your life ever told you about it? Therefore, I have to tell you who benefited from your silence. Because the moment you start asking why a $5 fix has been kept quiet for 2 centuries, you start pulling on a thread that leads somewhere most homeowners never look. The modern residential HVAC industry in the United States generates over $140 billion in annual revenue. The average central air installation in 2024 ran between $7,000 and $12,000. The average homeowner replaces that system every 12 to 15 years. Add in monthly electric bills that spike to $400 in August, plus annual maintenance contracts, plus emergency service calls when your unit gives out on the hottest weekend of the year, and you are looking at a lifetime cost of well over $40,000 per household just to push cold air through metal ducts. Picture this. You are sitting in a boardroom at one of the major HVAC manufacturers in 1978, the same year that Oak Ridge published the first formal study on radiant barriers. Someone walks in with data showing that a thin reflective film applied to existing windows could reduce residential cooling demand by 28 to 34% across the entire southern half of the country. What do you do with that information? You do not put it in your sales literature. You do not train your installers to mention it. You do not feature it in your spring promotion mailers. You let it disappear into a technical journal that your customers will never read. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is just basic economics. An industry built on selling expensive equipment has zero incentive to promote a $5 alternative that reduces the size of the equipment you need. The same way the bottled water industry has zero incentive to promote home filtration, and the same way the pharmaceutical industry has zero incentive to promote dietary changes that prevent disease in the first place. The Amish never had this problem because the Amish never invited the salesman through the door. When the rural electrification programs of the 1930s began stringing power lines across the American countryside, plain communities largely declined to connect. They watched their English neighbors take on debt to buy refrigerators, water heaters, and eventually air conditioners. They watched those same neighbors complain about the bills. And they kept doing things the way their grandfathers had taught them, which meant cooling the house with the sun itself by reflecting it before it ever became a problem. Picture this: the inside of an Amish farmhouse in mid-August. The windows on the south and west walls are covered with what looks like ordinary glass at first glance, but on closer inspection you see the faint shimmer of the reflective layer. The windows on the north and east walls are bare because those windows let in cool morning light and never receive direct afternoon sun. This is not random. This is the result of generations of careful observation passed from father to son, mother to daughter, written in nobody's manual but understood by everyone in the community. Compare that to your house. Every window treated the same, every window leaking heat in summer and leaking warmth in winter. Every window a hole in your wallet that you have been paying through every month of your adult life without ever realizing the leak was right there in front of you the whole time. Eli told me that when his oldest son got married and built his own home in 2003, the first thing they did before moving in any furniture was apply the reflective film to every south-facing and west-facing window. He told me they spent $47 in total. He told me the young couple's first summer in that house, with 2 wood stoves still in operation for cooking, never required them to open more than the upstairs sash windows at night for ventilation. The downstairs stayed at 69 degrees through the entire August heat dome of that year. Stay with me, because everything I am about to describe can be done in a single Saturday afternoon, with tools you already own, on windows that are already installed, without removing a single pane of glass or calling a single contractor. Here is what you need: a roll of low emissivity window film. You can find this at any decent hardware store, or online for between $4 and $7 per square foot. A spray bottle filled with water and 3 drops of dish soap, a plastic squeegee which usually comes free in the kit, a sharp utility knife, a clean lint-free cloth. That is it. The total investment for an average 3-bedroom home with 8 sun-facing windows is somewhere between $60 and $90. The labor is 1 afternoon. The application is almost insultingly simple. You clean the inside of the window with the soapy water until the glass is spotless. You spray the glass again until it is wet, not damp. You peel the backing off the film, which exposes the adhesive layer. You spray the adhesive side with the same soapy water, which prevents it from grabbing the glass too quickly and lets you slide it into position. You press the film against the wet glass, line up the edges, and use the squeegee to push the water out from the center toward the edges. You trim the excess with the utility knife along the edge of the window frame. You wipe the surface dry. You move to the next window. The Amish version of this, the one Eli's grandmother used, was a little different in materials but identical in principle. They used a tightly woven linen sheet treated with a wash that included powdered mica, which is a naturally reflective mineral. The mica gave the linen its shimmer and its reflective properties. They tacked these sheets to the inside of the window frame using small wooden pegs. In the winter, they would take them down and store them in a cedar chest until the following May. The modern film version is permanent, but you can also buy removable static cling versions if you only want it for the summer months. The first window I treated for a neighbor was the big west-facing one over his reading chair. For 22 years, that chair had been unusable from 2 in the afternoon until almost 7 in the evening because the sun would come blasting through that glass and turn the leather into a hot griddle. I applied the film on a Saturday in late June. By Monday afternoon, the chair was cool to the touch at 4 o'clock. He sat in it with a glass of iced tea and watched the thermometer on his back porch read 91 degrees while the room he was sitting in held steady at 73. He did not have his central air on. He had a ceiling fan turning slowly above him. That was it. His electric bill that July dropped from $341 to $238. I went back and asked him to pull 5 years of summer bills to make sure he was not imagining it. The pattern held. Every summer after that first application, his July and August bills came in between $90 and $120 lower than they had averaged before. Over the course of a single decade, that one Saturday afternoon project will have saved him somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000 in cooling costs. But there is something even bigger that I learned from Eli, and it is the reason this technique has survived in plain communities while it has been forgotten almost everywhere else. Because the film by itself is only the first half of the trick. The second half is what makes the whole thing work, and almost nobody outside of Lancaster County and Holmes County knows about it. That is what I am going to tell you next, and it is the part that the HVAC industry will be the most upset that you now know. Therefore, I have to walk you through the second half slowly, because if you only do the first half, you are leaving most of the savings on the table. The film reflects the radiant heat, but the air sealed between the film and the glass still warms up during the day. If that warm air is allowed to migrate into your room through the gaps around your window frame, you lose somewhere between 30 and 40% of the benefit you just paid for. The Amish solved this problem in the 1840s with something so obvious it almost feels like cheating. They used the exact same material their wives used to bake bread, beeswax. A man named Jonas Byler, who farmed a parcel of land near the village of Intercourse, Pennsylvania, wrote in a household ledger dated August of 1847 about the practice of running a thin bead of warm beeswax along the interior frame of every south-facing window before the start of the hot months. The wax filled the microscopic gaps between the wood frame and the plaster wall. It filled the seam between the sash and the jamb. It created an airtight seal that lasted the entire summer and could be peeled off easily in October when the heating season began. The ledger describes it as the practice his father taught him, which means the technique was already well established by the 1820s. I have done this on my own home for the last 6 years. You take a block of pure beeswax. You can buy it at any farmer's market or order it for around $8 a pound. You warm it in a small saucepan on low heat until it is just liquid, not boiling. You let it cool slightly until it has the consistency of soft honey. Then you take a small foam brush and you paint a thin line along every gap you can see around the inside of your window frame. The wax hardens within a minute. It is invisible from 3 feet away. It comes off cleanly with a butter knife when you are ready to remove it. Combined with the reflective film, this beeswax sealing technique pushes the total cooling savings on a treated window up to between 41 and 46%, according to measurements I took with a digital thermometer over 3 consecutive summers. That is nearly half of the cooling load on that window eliminated for a total cost of about $7 per window, including both materials. Before I give you the third element, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these old ledgers and these farmhouse kitchens, the window film you just learned about, the beeswax seal you are about to learn how to apply, the limestone box that comes next, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years, I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish home system. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because the third element is the one Eli's great-grandmother brought over from a village in the canton of Bern, Switzerland, and it is the piece that turns a south-facing window from a hole in your wallet into a 5-degree pocket of free, cool air. Here is the part that genuinely surprised me, and this is the secret I promised you at the beginning. There is a third element to the Amish technique that I did not learn about until my 4th visit to Eli's farm. He showed me a small wooden box on the windowsill of his kitchen window. Inside the box was a layer of crushed limestone gravel about an inch deep with a few small pieces of charcoal mixed in. He explained that on the hottest afternoons, his wife would pour about half a cup of cold well water onto the gravel just before midday. The water would slowly evaporate over the next 4 hours, drawn up through the porous limestone and the charcoal. The evaporation pulled heat directly out of the air immediately surrounding the window. The reflected light from the film, the sealed frame from the beeswax, and the evaporative cooling from the limestone box created a microclimate in the kitchen that ran 6 to 9 degrees cooler than the rest of the house. I asked him where this came from. He said his great-grandmother brought the technique with her from a village in the canton of Bern, Switzerland, where it had been used for centuries to keep dairy cellars cool in summer. The principle is the same one used in the Qanat cooling systems of ancient Persia and the patio fountains of Moorish Spain. Water evaporating in a confined space pulls heat out of that space. It is one of the oldest forms of air conditioning in human history, and it costs nothing but a half cup of water per day. I built my own version of the limestone box for less than $4. I used a shallow ceramic dish I already had, a bag of crushed limestone from the garden center for $2.79, and 3 pieces of charcoal from my grill. I set it on the windowsill of my treated window. On the first 90-degree afternoon after I built it, I held a thermometer 6 inches above the box. The air there read 71 degrees, while the air 4 feet away read 76. That is a 5-degree pocket of cooler air generated continuously for the cost of half a cup of water. The full Amish window technique has 3 layers. The reflective film stops the radiant heat from entering, the beeswax seal stops the warm air from migrating into the room, the limestone evaporative box actively cools the air immediately around the window during the hottest hours. Together, on a single south-facing window in a 1,000 square foot ranch home, this combination can reduce your cooling load by enough to keep your central air from kicking on at all on most summer days. Eli showed me the household account book his grandfather kept in the entire decade of the 1960s when his English neighbors were installing their first central air units and watching their electric bills triple. His family's total cash outlay for summer cooling was $42.16. That was the cost of beeswax, replacement linen sheets, and a few new hinges for the wooden boxes. $42 over 10 years, while the house next door was spending that much in a single August? This knowledge existed. It was suppressed by silence, not by law, because nobody who profited from the alternative had any reason to mention it. One community preserved it because they never invited the alternative through their door. And now you have it, the same 3-step technique that has been working in stone farmhouses across Pennsylvania and Ohio since the year your great-great-grandfather was born. You did not lose anything tonight. You recovered something. You recovered a piece of practical knowledge that should have been passed down to you by your father or your grandfather, but somewhere along the way the chain broke, and the people who profited from that broken chain made sure no one bothered to fix it. The Amish never let the chain break. They kept the knowledge alive by living it every summer, in every farmhouse, in every kitchen window across 2 states and almost 2 centuries. And now it is yours. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. You already know that the people running the boardrooms and the trade associations and the industry magazines are not on your side, and they never were. You already know that the only people who can be trusted to teach you how to live well on less are the people who have always lived well on less. The Amish are not behind. They were never behind. They saw what was coming 150 years ago, and they refused to walk into it. I want to ask you something specific, and I want you to actually answer in the comments below this video. Of the 3 layers I just walked you through, which one are you going to try first? The reflective film, the beeswax seal, or the limestone evaporative box? I am genuinely curious because the order you choose will tell me a lot about what kind of homeowner you are. Some of you are visual people who will go straight for the film because you can see the difference immediately. Some of you are detail people who will start with the beeswax because you understand that the small leaks are what end up costing you the most. And some of you are old souls who will go for the limestone box first because something in you already knows that water and stone have been cooling human beings for longer than electricity has even existed. Tell me below. I read every single comment. If you have made it this far, you are already part of something that most people watching cooling system commercials on television will never understand. There is a quiet movement of Americans who are recovering the practical knowledge that was taken from them, one technique at a time. Subscribing to this channel is not about supporting me. It is about making sure the next piece of recovered knowledge lands in your feed before it lands in anyone else's. Because the next video I am putting out covers something even more closely guarded than the window trick. It is a method the Amish use to keep an entire root cellar at a steady 52 degrees year-round in any climate without a single watt of electricity, using a material that costs less than the film I showed you tonight. There is a specific name for it, written on a barn beam in Lancaster County dated 1834, and once you hear it, you will never look at your basement the same way again.